Yes. In an interview, Saul Williams is asked what his guilty pleasures are, to which he responds,
Guilt is a tool.
What's that supposed to mean?
well, see it like this. If I do you wrong,
Like you always do, yes.
if I do you wrong, then there's a feeling of guilt that comes along with it. This feeling of guilt is the power you have over me for the wrongdoing. It is an internal mirroring of the external shift in dynamics which my wrongdoings brought about. In my apology, there's a submission, a desire to reconcile that dynamic, and in the acceptance of that apology, the scales are somewhat evened out. The person receiving the apology may even ask for you to make amends. And once again, this allows space for future reciprocity. Someone whose only motive is power, though, someone without a conscience, without empathy, who feels no guilt whatsoever, will never feel the impetus to apologize for things, as this submission would contradict their drive for power. Making others feel guilty, however, manipulation becomes a vital part of their engagement with others. Making people feel constant guilt with no intention for future reciprocity. A key reason why propaganda constantly relates the figure of the enemy with an undesirable species such as rats or leeches is to sever this empathy and ensure that however the state treats these groups is, over time, deemed not only acceptable, but desirable. Hence, Katie Hopkins labeling refugees as cockroaches acts to ensure that the images of drowning that flood our screens do not elicit a response. That we are not only accepting of the events, but that we associate their presence with an infestation. During a confession, the listener, and not the speaker, is in the position of authority. The confession doesn't necessarily have to be an apology, but there is the idea that it is only once the confession occurs that forgiveness can begin. Until then, guilt rots the soul. In the history of sexuality...
I thought we were talking about Fisher.
Yeah, I'm getting to it. Foucault writes, "The confession became one of the West's most highly valued techniques for producing truth. We have singularly become a confessing society. The confession has spread its effects far and wide. It plays a part in justice, medicine, education, family relationships, and love relationships, in the most ordinary affairs of everyday life, and in the most solemn rites. One confesses one's crimes, one's sins, one's thoughts, one's desires, one's illnesses and troubles. One goes on about telling, with the greatest precision, whatever it is that's most difficult to tell. Guilt is a tool of power. Confession utilizes this tool by assessing an individual in accordance to the desires and boundaries of the authority who the confession is being made to. Zizek notes that this feeling of guilt is a key aspect in the difference between fascism and communism.
The Stalinist show trials, where the tortured prisoners admit, yes, I collaborated in a plot to overthrow and kill Comrade Stalin. Such a thing cannot happen, doesn't have any place in the Nazi or fascist universe. Hitler could have easily done the same. Select some visible, important Jewish figures and claim there is a plot again and you torture them to confess. It's meaningless. Why? Because, and that's the tragedy, I'm not saying which one is better, because in Nazism, that's the horror of it, apropos Jews, they are guilty directly for what they are. All you have to prove is that they are Jews. You then have to prove what they plan to do and so on.
How do you hold immense wealth and power while also appearing as a victim, marginal and oppositional? The solution was already there in the Christian church. So the vampire's castle has recourse to all the infernal strategies, dark pathologies, and psychological torture instruments Christianity invented, and which Nietzsche described in the genealogy of morals. This priesthood of bad conscience, this nest of pious guilt-mongers, is exactly what Nietzsche predicted when he said that something worse than Christianity was already on the way. Now, here it is. In 2013, Mark Fisher
Finally
wrote an essay called Exiting the Vampire Castle, which argued for an increase in leftist solidarity, but one based on class rather than identity, towards redistribution rather than representation. In the essay, he goes on to say that the vampire's castle specializes in propagating guilt. The danger, he says, in attacking the vampire's castle is that it can look as if, and it will do everything it can to reinforce this thought, that one is also attacking the struggles against racism, sexism, and heterosexism. But far from being the only legitimate expression of struggles, the vampire's castle is best understood as a bourgeois liberal perversion and appropriation of the energy of these movements. The vampire's castle was born the moment when the struggle not to be defined by identitarian categories became the quest to have identities recognized by the bourgeois big other. Now, it's important to remember that this essay was written in 2013, and a lot has happened since then. Entire careers have been made when right-wing pundits make the case for anti-cancellation and political correctness gone mad discourses. There's a thin line between being critical of the liberal aspects behind these sentiments, while ensuring that one doesn't fall in line with reactionary sentiments and being utilized by right-wing pundits, or to hide certain views behind the guise of class consciousness, or being paralyzed from any political action in the name of authenticity. As Hegel says, to act is to